In a bid to address the challenge of food security in the nation, the federal government is rolling out a 50 billion naira anchor borrowers program for Nigerian local farmers, with the Bank of Agriculture playing a central role. What are the requirements for accessing the loans? What's the structure for repayment of loans? Does the Bank of Agriculture have enough capital base to bankroll this scheme? It's question time. Welcome to the program. I'm Benga Ashiru. Please join in this conversation. Send us a comment on our various social media platforms. Recently, the United Nations Children Education Fund raised the yellow flag that 400,000 Nigerians could die of hunger if nothing is done to stem this tide. In trying to put the federal government food security intervention plan into perspective, we caught up with the managing director of the Bank of Agriculture, Dr. Kabiru Adamu. We began by asking him the role of the Bank of Agriculture in addressing food security in the country.
As you are aware, as a bank, we are part of any process that relates to economic development of the country. The Vice President has at various forum reiterated the fact that agriculture remains the source of employing the youth, creating more economic activities. If you look at the agri value chain, you realize that there are so many activities along the value chain that can add to the productive activities in the economy.
What strategy are you bringing on board to ensure that the VP's mandate becomes a reality?
Well, basically our mandate is to lend agri loans to farmers, and we do that along the value chains. The opportunities along the value chains are quite enormous and inexhaustible, and by providing the needed financing, you are in a way supporting agricultural growth, economic growth that will lead to exiting of recession.
Now let's do a quick analysis of the CBN reforms. They are saying that for every agricultural project that the loan ceiling should not exceed 2 billion naira. Do you see that as the way to go? Do you see that as having the necessary stimulus for economic growth?
Well, you see, the issue of the 2 billion ceiling relates to commercial agri customers. That's what we call CACs, commercial agri products anchored by the Central Bank of Nigeria. But our own mandate is to provide financing support to smallholder farmers. So that being the case, the ceiling is not actually a hindrance to our ability to impact positively to the small farmers. If you look at it, our lending target is on 3 segments of the market. We have the smallholder farmers, which we are mandated to carry along throughout the value chain. We also have the commercial segment of the market, and then we have the agro processing segment of the market. So that ceiling of 2 billion is only applicable to the commercial segment of the market.
Okay, now let's look at the 9% single interest rate. Now, is that the way to go?
Well, you see, any kind of business that you do, either trade, production, or whatever, the cost element, is very critical. That 9%, reduces the cost of financing, to the farmer. And by extension, it means when the, produce is harvested, the cost of that, production is, drastically reduced. And then the ability of the farmer to also repay is made easier because the interest rate, is lower. Again, more people tend to be attracted, into the program, because if you look at, the commercial banks, why it is always difficult to access loans, from them is because the interest rate is always higher than what the development finance institution like us, can give.
Internationally now, we have the Bill Gates Foundation injecting about $30 billion from grants into agricultural production in Africa. And the Rice Farmers Association of Nigeria, the RIFAN, are jostling to ensure that they gain access to this. How is the Bank of Agriculture assisting this group to access this fund to stimulate economic growth?
Definitely. Like, we have collaboration with, various development partners. And, there are quite a number of groups, in West Africa that are championing, this initiative. AGRA, for example, which is the Agricultural Green Revolution for Africa, is one of such groups that is championing, this cause. Recently, they were in Nigeria. We had several strategy, sessions with them. We have collaborated, with them and the RIFAN, that is the Rice Farmers Association of Nigeria, on how to easily access, into this funding arrangement. And, we are already there.
At the continental level, let's look at the African Development Bank now. The second high fives of the reform is the Feed Africa production. And this raises a very scary statistics about the total import of food to Africa at $35 billion, which might rise to $110 billion by 2025. What is the Bank of Agriculture doing to ensure that Nigeria gets to the level of self-sustenance before then?
Well, it is scary, in the sense that when you talk about, forecasts that are, anemically, adverse, to an economy of, a country, you have to, look at it, holistically and see how you can key in, to the vehicles that will get you, out of that focus. First and foremost, we are engaged in, capacity building, trying to, educate, the farmers on the new techniques, in farming. We are also, collaborating with other partners to, introduce new hybrid seeds, that will improve the yield and, basically, the output.